Today marks the first ever Quebec Buy Local Day. The goal is to encourage Quebecers to support homegrown products and businesses. In the meantime, Quebec is also pushing to open up not just to the world, but to the rest of Canada. Quebec has tabled legislation to remove trade barriers between the provinces. Christopher Skeete is the Minister for the Economy, among many other ministries, and also the minister responsible for the fight against racism. He joins me on the line. Good morning, Minister Skeete.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I want to get to buy local, but before we start, I'd love to get your reaction about Michael Sabia moving from Hydro-Quebec to the federal government. I heard yesterday someone saying he was stolen from under Premier Legault. How much of a blow is this to your government?
Well, I think it puts us in a positive position. Michael Sabia knows the Quebec economy, knows the Quebec projects. Of course, he's of tremendous quality, and he'll be missed. But I think it's a great thing that Quebecers are taking their place inside Mr. Carney's cabinet. If you think of his chief of staff now, his chief civil servant, all Quebecers, combine that with François-Philippe Champagne at finance, combine that with Mélanie Joly at economy, I think Quebecers are taking their place inside this government. So I think it's a good sign. Of course, Michael Sabia will be missed. But of course, overall, I think it's a win for everybody.
And any ideas as to who might be tabbed to replace him at Hydro-Quebec?
Well, right now the board is going to be evaluating different candidacies. There's a person who's going to be acting up until we have a permanent person there. But no, it's too early to tell who's going to replace him.
Because it looks like it's happening fast. I mean, Sabia is like literally running down the highway as we speak.
Well, I think the time, and I think that speaks to the times. The times that we live in are very uncertain, very difficult, and it times for action. So, but yeah, things are happening fast, and they're going to continue to happen fast for the next few years. We have a lot of catching up to do.
Okay. I don't know if it's appropriate to say things are slowing down on the local front, but in the sense that, the slow food movement may be finally arriving in Quebec. I want to talk to you about this Buy Local. Today is Buy Local Day. So first of all, how did this come about?
Well, a lot of people in the English community don't realize that August 12th is the Buy a Quebec Book Day. And that's something that's been going on for a few years now. And in the Francophone community, it's very popular and people have joined onto the movement. What we want to do is replicate the same successes that we had for Buy a Quebec Book with Buy Local. And I think now it's really important. When you think about all the shocks, the supply shocks that we've had over the past few years, people forget. But, we had our first shock, which was the pandemic. We were literally scared that certain foods wouldn't cross the border anymore. Then we had the supply chain shock during the pandemic and a little bit just as it was winding down. And now, of course, we have the Trump shock. And I think all these things have to make us realize that we have to be more resilient. We have to build a stronger local economy, and we have to be exemplary in our purchasing of local goods.
And so, to the point about the books where everybody knows it, how are you spreading the word about Buy Local? To be honest, I didn't know until I came in today.
Well, I think that speaks to some of the duality that exists in Quebec, for starters. But of course, by coming on your show and speaking about it, I think today we have an opportunity to talk about the fact that there's 285 businesses that have signed on to Les Produits du Québec, and they have about 120,000 verified products. Aliments du Québec has 28,000 products that are verified, grown in Quebec. And so these are things that I think people should know about. And I think it's something that we need to look at, because for every time that we have a Quebec-based business, there are jobs behind that. So for every 100 jobs directly tied to a local product, 60 indirect jobs are dependent on those jobs. So it's really a strong impact for our economy that makes us more resilient.
And how is the government supporting some of these producers? Because as we know, some of them are really small.
Yeah, you're right. We have a lot of SMEs, but of course, they have a tremendous impact on our GDP. So we have to support them. One of the things that people tell us is that, well, a lot of times we have, misguided indications about whether or not a product is made in Quebec. It's not because you have a Quebec address that you're considered a Quebec product. We want verifiable products that have a certain set percentage that we've checked and that we know for a fact are in fact Quebec based. And when we do that, we realize that Quebecers are ready to pay up to 10% more in order to know that those products were in fact Quebec-based and they want to buy those Quebec-based products. What's missing is the certainty that they're actually Quebec-based. And so this Les Produits du Québec certified thing is something that the government finances and promotes to make sure that we have that assurance when we're buying those products.
So it's tough, though, as a consumer sometimes, right? So is it then, is it okay to go to Walmart and buy Quebec products at Walmart, or is it better to go to a Quebec grocery store like Metro or IGA? Those. What are you saying to
Yep.
consumers?
The answer is yes. Walmart, I mean, people don't realize this, but it's one of the 285 businesses that have signed on to Les Produits du Québec. They're a verified retailer. And inside Walmart, you'll see the logo for certain Quebec-made products. Now, Walmart, of course, is an American company, but that doesn't mean that they're not putting front and center Quebec-based products. So the answer is yes, you can go to your normal store that you go to. You can go to Walmart. You can go to Canac. You can go and shop at different places. And so what we could do is identify the products. And then in the aisles, you can actually see the things that are made in Quebec. And we think that if we make it easier for you to buy those products and to visualize them and to know that they're made in Quebec, then consumers will make the right choice. And that's basically the reason why we have this Buy Quebec Products Day today, so that people make that extra effort. As a stat, or an important one, the Ministry of Agriculture did a survey, and they determined that if you add just $10 of Quebec-based products in your groceries, it's $1 billion of impact on our local
Wow,
economy. It's
crazy.
huge.
And so you and I have been talking mostly about food, but is buy local really just food, or does it extend to other products as well?
Yeah, it's also so you have two brands. You have Les Aliments du Québec, and that's 28,000 food items that are verified Produits du Québec. Then you have Les Produits du Québec, which is a separate thing for products that are not food. There they have designed in Quebec, made in Quebec, and from Quebec. And those are the three logos that they support. And those, well, like I said, there's 285 retailers and 120,000 verified products out there. I'm thinking of different soap products that might exist, different manufacturing goods that might be made. So if you go to the website Les Produits du Québec, you'll have an inventory of all the sites where all the products that you can buy and all the different retailers that are signed on.
So, I was thinking the other day, Quebec strawberries are in the stores, and in my store, they're over $6 for a tiny little punnet. And, of course, ones from Mexico or California are $3. How do you make the case to consumers that, they you want them to spend that extra money here at home?
Well, beyond the taste, let's face it, those, those strawberries are basically water. They're paying $3 for a little thing of water.
Right, but affordability is an issue for a lot of people, obviously.
I agree. I agree. But as I said, usually, so we have data and we have done polling that suggests that Quebecers are ready to pay up to 10% more if they know for sure that it's made in Quebec. But usually, Quebec-based products are competitive. They're usually less expensive or just as expensive as other products. Now, of course, food is one of those things where that might be a little different sometimes. But I would say that there's a myth out there that says buying local is more expensive. That's not always true.
hmm All right. I'd like to also just briefly touch on the interprovincial trade barriers. It occurs to me that a lot of Quebec producers are hoping that those barriers will be moved down so their products can move. How's it going? I know Quebec is the first province to table legislation to bring those barriers down. Of course, Prime Minister Carney's been talking about this week. But a lot of people are saying, we talk about this all the time, but it's harder than it sounds. How is that going?
I think your listeners will be very happy to hear the leadership position that Quebec government has taken. I tabled a bill on May 30th that for the first time ever has a default posture of being open to Canadian-based goods. The crux of it is if it can be sold and manufactured in Canada, it can be sold in Quebec. And so we recognize automatically that those goods, if they're good enough for an Albertan, if they're good enough for an Ontarian, then they're good enough for a Quebecer. Now, within the legislation, we give ourselves certain restrictions. So what we'll say is we're open unless, and then of course the different ministries and organizations within the government are going to have to supply to the Ministry of Economy the restrictions that they want to keep. But the default posture is open, and that is you're right. It's revolutionary, and that's never been done in Quebec. And the good news is other provinces are following suit. Right now, there are 4 or 5 other provinces who have tabled or passed legislation in that regard. And that's really good news for trade in Canada. There's a market of 40 million people that we don't take enough advantage of.
All right. Well, Christopher Skeete, this is the beginning of a conversation that I know we'll be having a lot over the next couple of months and years. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Christopher Skeete. He's the Minister for the Economy of Quebec.